There was a moment in American history when simply owning money could send you to prison. Not counterfeit money, not stolen money. Real money. A single decision turned millions of ordinary citizens into criminals overnight. Their savings were no longer theirs. Their independence was no longer legal, and the government didn't negotiate. It demanded obedience under threat of prison. Most people believe something like that could never happen again. But history doesn't repeat because people forget dates. It repeats because people ignore patterns, and that same pattern is forming again, right now, on a much larger scale. In April of 1933, banks, post offices, and federal buildings across the United States received a short document signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Executive Order 6102. Its message was simple and absolute. All Americans were required to surrender their gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve by May 1st, 1933. They had just 26 days. In return, the government would pay $20.67 per ounce, the official price at the time. Refusal carried a punishment of up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, more than $200,000 in today's money. Overnight, gold ownership became illegal. Americans who had saved in gold their entire lives were suddenly holding contraband. There were small exceptions. Jewelry, gold used in industry, rare collectible coins, and up to $100 in gold coins barely enough to matter. Serious savings had to be surrendered. This wasn't regulation. It was confiscation. Before 1933, gold wasn't an investment or a hedge. It was money itself. The dollar was a claim on gold. Any American could walk into a bank and exchange paper dollars for gold at a fixed rate. That system imposed discipline. Governments couldn't endlessly spend or print without consequence. Every new dollar required real backing. For ordinary people, that meant security. Gold couldn't be diluted by political decisions. It couldn't be printed into worthlessness. But by the late 1920s, the system was under strain. Easy credit fueled speculation. Debt exploded. Asset prices detached from reality. Then came October 1929. Markets collapsed. Banks failed. Panic spread. Between 1929 and 1933, more than 9,000 U.S. banks shut down. Depositors lost everything. Those who still had money no longer trusted paper promises. They wanted gold. That was the breaking point. If too many people converted dollars into gold, the treasury would run out. Without gold backing, the entire monetary system would collapse. Roosevelt faced a choice: allow the gold standard to discipline government spending, or break it completely. He chose control. Just 2 days after taking office, Roosevelt shut down every bank in America. For 4 days, citizens couldn't access their money. Congress rushed through emergency legislation granting the president broad powers over banking, currency, and gold. Weeks later, the confiscation order followed. Most people complied, not because they agreed, but because resistance meant prison and financial ruin. Gold flowed into government vaults, and then came the move that almost no one talks about. In January 1934, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act. It transferred all monetary gold directly to the U.S. Treasury and revalued gold from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. That was a 69% increase overnight. Think about what that meant. Americans were forced to sell gold at one price. Then the government immediately declared it far more valuable. If you surrendered $100,000 in gold, you were paid $100,000. But the government now owned something worth $169,000. The difference didn't disappear. It was transferred from citizens to the state. This wasn't just about wealth. It was about power. By revaluing gold higher, the government could issue far more currency against the same amount of gold. Without mining a single ounce, it massively expanded the money supply. Inflation followed. Finally, the government revalues the asset and expands spending while citizens absorb the loss. The United States wasn't unique. Britain restricted gold ownership. France discouraged and limited it. Nazi Germany confiscated gold under national security claims. The Soviet Union banned private gold ownership entirely. Australia required government permission to own significant amounts. Different countries. Same response. Once governments gain control over gold, they rarely give it up. In the US, gold ownership wasn't legalized again until December 31st, 1974. Why did it take 41 years? Because gold competes with government-issued money. As long as citizens couldn't own gold, they couldn't escape inflation. By the time gold ownership returned, the dollar had already been severed from gold internationally. Gold was no longer a threat. The system had changed. Today, the conditions that led to 1933 are forming again. U.S. debt exceeds $36 trillion. Deficits run into the trillions annually. Interest payments approach $1 trillion per year. Central banks are trapped, raise rates, and crash the system, or print and devalue. The difference now is that governments don't need to physically seize gold. They have more subtle tools. Reporting requirements and punitive taxes make ownership expensive and visible. Bail-in laws allow banks to use depositor funds during failures. Digital currencies give governments the ability to program money itself. Capital controls can restrict what you buy, move, or convert during crises. No confiscation trucks. No announcements. Same. Result. When confidence in paper money fades, people seek hard assets. Gold reveals the truth about currency debasement, and when truth threatens control, governments respond. The 1933 confiscation wasn't ancient history. It was a preview. The names change. The tools evolve. The incentives stay the same. When the next crisis hits, the rules will change fast, without warning, just like they did before. The difference between those who lose and those who don't is preparation. Because when governments say, "This is for stability," history shows who actually pays the price.